G'day viewers and welcome to Wimble Train. On today's video we're going to have a look at how a reversing loop works. So here's the setup here for the reversing loop. Now there's a couple of things that we need to talk about that you need to set up with your reversing loop. So at one end of the system we have our main line coming in, have power connected. In this case I've got just a DC controller. And then we have a turnout, and then we have the actual loop of track itself. But one thing to note, that in the reversing loop itself, at the two ends, we have the tracks isolated. So that whole loop is isolated from the rest of the main line. And that's after the turnout. So one other thing we need is a reversing switch. It's that little black box down there. Now all that is a double pole, double throw switch wired in a particular way. Now we can go and have a look at the actual wiring diagram for that now. I'll just bring that up on screen. Now here's the circuit diagram of the reversing switch. As you can see, we have our DC power from the controller, or DCC if you like, whatever you're using. And then we have a wire running from the bottom left to the top right, the positive there. And then we have another connection from the bottom right connection to the top left. And then we basically take our power feed for the rail off the two center connectors. Now the two green lines there represent the current connection of the switch. So when the switch is in the position shown, the positive will be connected to the middle left and the negative to the middle right, and that's the polarity we'll have on our rails. So now if we operate that switch, the connections are made from the top connectors with the green lines. So then the positive is connected to the right hand side center of the switch, and the negative to the left hand center, and then that reverses the polarity on our rails. Okay, now we'll just run through how this all works in terms of the circuit diagram and how the polarities are applied to the tracks. So you can see here in the first slide we've got the controller in the forward position, and then we've got our positive and negative connected to the rails. And if you look in the middle there, we can see our insulating rail joiners, which isolate the reversing loop electrically from the main line, which is very important. It's what you need to do. And then we have our reversing switch connected from our controller to the reversing loop itself, the isolated section. Now at the moment, you can see the polarities shown either side of the insulating rail joiners. So now we'll represent the train by the green arrow on the screen, and what we're going to do is go straight through the turnout and then through the reversing loop and back. So as the train approaches, we can see here that our polarities are correct because we have positive on the bottom rail on both sides of the insulating rail joiners. Now if they were opposite, if you tried to go across with the locomotive, it would just short out and your controller would shut down. So because the polarities are the same, we can go through all the way through the reversing loop, and then we stop the train before we exit the actual loop itself. So as you can see here, we have to stop because we have opposite polarities on the same rails. So for example, the top rail where the train is on the right hand side is positive, whereas the top rail is negative on the other side. And of course we're going to run into trouble and cause a short circuit if we take the train over that insulating rail joiner. So what we do first is we operate the reversing switch. Now you see up the top there, it's straight through at the moment. So then now we've crossed over the polarities, and you can see near the red arrow now, the polarities changed. Now we have negative on both top rails. We now have the correct polarities either side of the insulating rail joiners. But the only problem with that at the moment is that if we apply throttle, the train will go in reverse. So we need to reverse the polarity of our controller. So basically put it in reverse mode. And this will be more apparent in the demo. So now we've got positive and positive on the top rail. That's all good. But the only other thing we haven't done yet is operate the turnout. So we need to operate that turnout, and then we can move the train forward and through and back to the main line, and we're done. So here's our setup. We'll do a bit of a demo now, so hopefully you can understand it a bit better. Like at this end, we've got the main line, which basically run to the rest of your layout. I've got power connected there, just DC plus and minus, just for the demo purposes. Now if we come over here, hopefully we can see that the turnout is in the straight position at the moment. And I've just applied a little bit of power to the controller. Now we can see here, we have all these LEDs. Now in between the LEDs, we have insulated rail joiners. So basically this whole loop is isolated from the main line, all this part. So now, because we have the two LEDs matching, so the LEDs lighting up means that's the positive side of the rail. So positive and positive on either side of the isolated section on the same rail, so we can forward our train into the loop. We have our controller in the forwards direction. We know the polarity is correct. We're going to go straight through the turnout and into the loop. So we'll just take the train into the loop. And then we're just going to keep going, and we're going to stop before we get to the end of the loop, before the isolated section ends. So I'll just pull it up here. You can see the headlights, the train. We'll just put a little bit of power so you can see that. So to get out of the loop now, we need to operate the turnout before we do anything. So if we operate that, like so, and we come over here. So now we can see is on the isolated part of the track where the train is, the top rail is positive, whereas on the other side of the isolated section, the bottom rail is positive. So if we try and run a train across that, it's just going to short out and our controller will shut down. So what we need to do first is to operate the reversing loop switch. Now just notice the headlights on the actual train itself. Now the train's saying it's going to go forwards, and if I operate this switch, we can see that the two LEDs match now, but now we've got red lights on the train. So if we apply power now, the train will go back the other way, which is what we don't want. We want it to come forwards in this direction and out through the turnout. So what we need to do next is basically go to the controller and put it in reverse. So I'll flick that over and we'll have a look at what happens to the LEDs. So you can see now that the polarity of the track's changed. We've got the two LEDs lit up on the top rails, meaning that's positive, and we've got our headlights back on the actual train itself. So now we can just apply power, and the train should come out of the loop without an issue. Like that. And we're out. And then we can just stop it here. Okay, that's it for the reversing loop. I think someone mentioned this on a previous video about a reversing loop. That's why I did this video. So thanks to them for the idea. This was my first go at it. Took a little bit of working out, but in the end, all good. So I hope you enjoyed the video. We'll see you on the next one. This is John at Wimble Train saying enjoy your model railways as always, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.